Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 24 of the Lebanese Biodiversity Podcast. My name is Mira, and I am an entomologist. My guest today is Salma Ghanem. Salma is an environmental researcher working currently at the American University of Beirut Nature Conservation Center. She has a background in global health and environment and is passionate for environmental education. From the forests of Canada to the mountains of Lebanon, and from a global approach to the environment to slowly building a close relationship with plants, Salma tells us more about her story today, which, to borrow her words, goes accesser, or in the opposite direction. While discussing her work, we speak about some examples and challenges of science communication. For example, how to translate the relationship native communities have to their beloved plants to simple, digestible words, and also more about the ethnobotany project that she is currently working on. We hope you enjoyed this one and see you on the next one. Well, good afternoon, Salma. How are you today?
Good, thanks. And you?
I'm fine, thank you. So, can we start off by a little introduction about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I'm Salma Ghanem. I'm an environmentalist, you could say. Just moved back to Lebanon recently, but I grew up moving abroad to different countries. In my youth, I eventually settled in Canada for high school and university. My background was in global health and nutrition in my undergrad, and my master's was environmental sustainability. Both very interdisciplinary, so a bit all over the place, but um, environment and health, you could say, are my two big fields. And yeah, I was supposed to come back to Lebanon just for a gap year to be with family, but now I'm moved back officially and I'm working as a researcher at the AUB Nature Conservation Center.
We are glad that you found your way back to Lebanon. And before this part of your journey, which is the today part of your journey, why did you decide to go into environmental studies, or why did you decide to study what you studied?
I wasn't ever planning to enter the field of environment explicitly. I think when I was in high school, I just wanted something that could mix arts and humanities because arts and sciences, but I didn't know what could do it, what could actually mix both because I liked both at the same time. And I wanted something that was impactful. So I was kind of thinking, oh, I'll go humanitarian, or I feel like when you're in high school, you have no idea what is out there even. So I started university and I was learning about global issues. I found a program called Global Resource Systems, which kind of combined everything, and the root of the problem was all the environment. Kind of every topic I was interested in, it tied back to the environmental field. I was interested in health, and I found that everything relies on the health of our planet, our well-being, it was just the way to connect all the topics I was ever interested in. So then I went forward and I found myself in the environmental field. But yeah, it was never planned to begin with.
Okay, well, another atypical part of your journey is that you ended up in Lebanon. Usually, what happens to most of us is we want to work in the environment, and then we somehow end up outside of Lebanon and stay there. So, as someone who
Mhm.
discovered Lebanon later in life, um, can you share with us some of your impressions, like of being able to live in it for longer than usual, visit it extensively, discovering or rediscovering nature, landscape, or anything else you would like to tell us about?
Mhm. There's so much to share on this one. I feel
Go
I don't
ahead.
even know where to start. I'm still figuring it out because there's so many layers to it. There's, like you said, there's the landscape, the nature, day-to-day life, and it's all kind of every day there's something new, as you know, being in Lebanon. So growing up, I felt a deep sense of belonging to Lebanon because my family's from here, they grew up here. Even though we lived abroad, I visited every summer. My whole entire family outside of my parents and siblings live in Lebanon. So I felt, oh, moving back, it'll be pretty simple. I'll I'll know what's going on. I've been in the summer, but I used to visit just the mountains, so it's also very a unique experience that I'm from the mountains. So coming back, it was overwhelming to say the least. First, it was lonely because I was in the mountains, so I didn't know any young people. Just kind of sat with my grandma and my family and just finding my footing. What's day-to-day life here like? I feel like all the young people have left. There's no one here. Everyone, like you said, has done their university and then gone elsewhere. I had people asking me like "Leje Yaksasayed," which is like, why are you coming the opposite way? And I
Yes.
didn't even have the answer. I didn't have the answer. I would just be like, oh, I don't know, I'm here, you know. So I felt lost too. But then over time, I started an internship in the city and I started to meet people my age. I began to find all these passionate people who are so passionate about the environment, teaching me about it. It kind of reframed my whole view of Lebanon. I thought it was this place that people have really neglected the environment. I feel like it's a common story you hear. You know, people don't care. You know, when Lebanese people leave Lebanon, they care so much, and then when they come back, they're back to their old ways, like all these stereotypes. So I
Yeah, we've
had
heard
these
a lot.
ideas. Exactly. So then I was kind of expecting that, but then instead, what I got is very passionate people who are impact driven, they're aware of the problems, they want to fix it, they're working together. And even in the family, just seeing like in the mountains how people were very closely connected to nature and the seasons, the rhythms of nature. They know what's blooming, they know when to eat it, they know how to use it. And yeah, just it showed me a different side of the story that people are way more in tune with nature than I had thought and imagined, and I had a lot to learn. So it was really nice actually to feel that in our traditions, we are actually very connected, and there are a lot of environmentalists here.
Yeah, I agree that what you see from the outside, or this impression that we don't care about the environment in Lebanon, is also very closely linked, in my opinion, to the fact that the geopolitical situation is always very unstable, and that like environmental policy making is always pushed as not being a priority. So this is kind of what you see on the surface. But I do agree that the reality is that people are very linked to their environment, and what is really striking is that the type of relationship and the rhythm really varies a lot between regions because Lebanon has such diverse landscapes on such a small surface. Every time you change mountains or valleys, you see that the rhythm is slightly different and that people are very in tune with what's happening around them. Well, thank you for sharing this. This was really cool. And now let's talk a bit more about like where this landed you. So you mentioned
Mhm.
your current position. Could you tell us a bit more before taking up the job that you're working now? What was your
Mhm.
work experience? What were the type of projects, sorry, you were involved in?
Yeah, for
That
sure.
was the question.
So before this job, so before Lebanon, I'd say mostly on the environmental education side of things. I used to be a tour guide at a botanical garden in Canada. I was also like a children's outdoor farm camp. So lots of like outdoor jobs with people educating about nature, climate change. And then later it became more working with older students or postgraduates and thinking about the sustainable development goals. So how can we work towards them? And then most recently, I've gotten more into educational research. So how do we actually teach about the environment to people? And then at my recent job now at AUB, it's a bit of everything. So I'm still working on kind of nature communication, but also climate change in the Middle East, health. So it's more varied now, I'd say.
When we first got in contact, you mentioned that one of the things that you're working on involved plants and ethnobotany, more precisely.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
how did it get to plants? So you just mentioned that you were working in a botanical garden. That might have been a good
Hmm.
start, but When did you decide to actively start working on plants, or was it just an opportunity that you took because it presented itself and you were already sensitive to the topic?
That's a great question because I feel like I was not interested in plants since I was a kid. It's not something that I feel like I have a natural interest in, you could say. I just kind of became a botanical tour guide because I like talking to people, and they made me memorize all these facts about native trees. And at first
Okay.
I was like, oh, how am I gonna memorize all of this? It's so many facts. And I think I was 18 at the time, just starting university, so I was not even sure what I was interested in. And then with each tour, I memorized the facts like that just so immediately, and then started going on and on and on. And the facts were more about because I was in Vancouver, there's an indigenous community there called the Musqueam. And so it was about how these people use the plants and how kind of they related to native trees. So medicinally, yeah, medicinally for shelter. So I just know a bunch of random facts about Canadian native trees and how indigenous people use them. But then I became super interested in this and became better at plant identification and just started to even kind of know what's edible, what's not. But it was kind of a side hobby. So I get to Lebanon, and then kind of tying into the last question about how it was moving back, I get to Lebanon, I'm like, oh, I love plants. I know a thing or two. And then I look around, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on around me. I cannot identify a single thing. I'm so embarrassed. Like, I know the Arabic names, like even something like sage in Arabic. I didn't know that that was sage in English. I just know asain, and no, it's like
Okay.
that thing when your tummy hurts, and
Yeah.
I drink it, and then so it's just a whole new world. And so I started my internship at AUB, and there was this project where we had to identify a few plants with Dr. Salma Talhouk.
Jumping in here to introduce Professor Salma Talhouk. Professor Salma is a professor at the American University of Beirut, and she is a plant expert. She is the author of the book Trees of Lebanon, which includes help for the identification of the native tree species that we have, and also storytelling about native trees across Lebanon.
And she was just kind of, okay, yeah, here's a list of plants, and we're going to identify them together. So that's kind of how the project started. I can talk more about the project if you.
Yes, of course. One thing that I would want to expand on before we move on to the specifics of the project, even though you have answered that, but it
Mhm.
was defining ethnobotany, basically, for people who do not
Mhm.
know what it is. Can you,
Mhm.
like, define it in layman's terms? What do you actually study when you
Of
are doing
course, of
ethnobotany?
course. So to disclaimer, I'm not a botanist or ethnobotanist, but I've been dabbling.
Yes.
My understanding is it's a study of how people from different communities or cultures or groups interact with the plants and their relationships they form with plants every day. So it could either be how they use it for medicine, how they maybe ceremony, spiritual, just kind of any uses. So basically, how humans interact with plants.
This brings us to today, to your current work. Would you like to tell us more about the project that you're working on?
Mhm. Yeah, so we just recently wrapped up this project. It's called Trail Tales About Nature, TTN. I've been working on it since I moved back, so since September 2023. It got interrupted with the war, as like everything else did, so it's been a rocky process. But yeah, the project started off very simply. It was just to identify a few plants along the Lebanon Mountain Trail. We were working with the Museum of Archaeology at AUB. So they were identifying cultural heritage along the trail, and they asked AUB NCC to identify the natural heritage. So I was given a few pictures along the trail and an old botanical textbook, a Lebanese textbook, and kind of trying to play a matching game. So look at this plant and figure out which plant it is. And I had coworkers around helping. So once we started identifying these, we kind of met, me and Dr. Talhout met, and she was saying, okay, well, where do we go from here? kind of the Latin names, it's a bit boring.
Hmm.
Now we've identified these Latin names. Next, what do we do? And so it just started off as a brainstorm. Maybe we should, share some fun facts or something like that. And then it became, okay, well, how do you actually communicate nature to people? How do you bring people closer to it through facts? What are people interested in? And so I started a literature review on how to engage people with nature, which there's not a lot out there. But what we did find is that um, kind of using scientific names, it disengages people because it's not for everyone. So if you're walking down a trail and you kind of go, this is the Latin name for something, people might be like, okay, so, and let's move on now. Um, it also found that the way to pull people in is using human storytelling. So kind of relating something in nature to how people have used it medicinally, historically, culturally, maybe even connecting it to a song, something people can relate to more so they feel a sense of connection. And then experientially, so getting someone to taste a plant, smell it, touch it. And these things felt really basic, but we were like, okay, so what do we do with this now? Let's try to match up all these native plants with some stories. So this felt simple, but then it was very hard
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
first of all, there's no database in Lebanon on native plants. I think we were just talking about this earlier. Like every village calls a plant a different thing. Every person might use a plant differently, and these are it's more like folklore. So it's not something where you can open a book in Lebanon and figure out what everybody in each village calls a specific plant. And
Hmm.
then the books that do exist, the databases that do exist, they're more scientific Latin names. And or even if you use one of those plant apps and you scan a plant, it will say like this is native to North America or invasive to North America. So it's not even understanding that you're in Lebanon. So it took some field work and some desk work to kind of go around collecting these plant stories from everyone and starting to build them into a database. And then finally, we took all our facts to some hiking guides and we said, here are our facts. What do you think about these? And they basically said, it has to be way more simple. It has to be digestible to people. Please get rid of the very scientific language. Um, Simple stories, fun stories, engaging stories, because not everyone coming to a hike is curious about plants, which hurts, but it's true.
Where did this go next?
So we had to take this very elaborate database and turn it into kind of simplistic field guides with a picture and just some key facts. So not a sentence, not more than a sentence about ecology of the plant, some local stories about the plant, physiology fun facts, and just really simplifying it to be something that guides could use on their walks. So they would share these plant stories on a walk while they're guiding people through nature.
Okay, just a question that pops up now, that
Mm-hmm.
comes to mind while you speak about this. So basically, this has to be personalized by region almost, if it's something that you have to expand to the whole territory.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so
Okay,
something we struggled with.
yeah, that's a lot of
Go ahead,
work. Yeah.
sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that is God. Okay. So yeah, go on. How did you resolve that issue?
Yeah, so it ended up having to be Lebanon wide, like 14 of the most common spring and fall plants, because we were finding this issue of every region calls it something different. There's different stories. The challenge was how do we tell stories that are Lebanon wide? So even in the names, we'd say it's called this or this or this or
Yes.
this or this, and the list goes on. So we kind of had to cut it off at some point because we couldn't talk to every person in every village in Lebanon. So it's not the most kind of comprehensive database, but our hope is that it keeps building. So it became a joke in my workplace that if anyone has any fun fact about a plant or anything, they come to me so I can write it down and add it
Okay,
to this database.
so this has actually sparked two different things, or two separate parts of this project. The first one being you started and you're actually now growing a database of facts and stories and different uses of plants in Lebanon. And the second one is transforming some of this into digestible content that nature guides can use, which, well, you need the database to produce the fun facts, but you will not use the entirety. But I'm like actually very happy to hear that you are still expanding the database behind it and that this didn't stop at the scope of what you could actually reuse for the general public.
Exactly. Because the hope would be that I think everyone is working in this might be being done in Lebanon already, but it's not being centralized.
Yes.
So the idea is what if all of these databases on plants and all of this knowledge could be centralized somewhere? So it's knowledge, the knowledge is passed on.
Yes, uh, I think there is a lot of knowledge that was never published, of
Hmm.
course, but how can people communicate facts to you, for example? Is this something that you would be interested in? Have you done a call or will you do a call to the general public to send you facts from their village, from their parents, or from their own experience?
I would love nothing more than if people reached out to me with plant facts about Lebanon. First, for my own, I need to learn more, but then also to add to this database. Right now, we're at the stage of giving these field guides out to hiking guides. So if there's also a hiking guide listening that wants to use this field guide, they're more than welcome.
Okay.
The people adding facts to the database, it's more in the background, but as well, I'd love that.
Okay, so two things that I will highlight on what you just said, which is just paraphrasing, but the material
Hmm.
that you have worked on, the educational material that you have worked on, is available for nature guides, sorry, who would like to use it. They can ask you for that,
Hmm.
and of course, people can send you plant facts. Also, the last question that I had to wrap up this part of the project is basically if the general public wants to experience it, which is experience the storytelling part, how can they like get access to that on their hikes?
We're kind of navigating it right now because we're hoping to turn this into a research study. So
Okay.
the first step would be the hikers using it on their tours, and then the second step would be the hiking guides using it on their tours. And the
Yes.
second step would be interviewing the hikers that go and seeing what they thought about it. So we kind of need the hiking guides to use them first. We're already in touch with a few,
Okay.
but just waiting to see if they've used them.
Yeah, so people volunteering might not know that they are volunteering before they go onto the hike, but I'm
Exactly.
sure a lot of people would
Exactly.
like to volunteer, including me. And
Exactly.
well, of course, send your feedback on on how digestible they thought the information was.
Hmm.
Although I mean, you are speaking, and I always realize how biased I am because I'm like, what? People are not interested in random plant
I
facts.
know.
Is this
I know.
possible?
I know. It's so painful. So actually our research team, it was awesome because we were all from a different background. We had, but similar. We had a medical student, and we had a biology student, and we had me, and we had Dr. Talhout. And we all kind of come from a science background. We're interested in biology, environmental systems. So she kept, Dr. Talhout kept, pushing us to try to not think of the scientific perspective. What would
Yes,
some
not from
random
your own
person on a
perspectives.
hike
Yeah.
exactly? And we were so struggling with it. It was funny because we'd bring her a fact and we'd be like, this one's gonna win. It's amazing. And then she'd read it and be like, guys, I don't think anyone cares. And we're like, what? What do you? This is the best thing ever. Like some examples of some things that worked was I can't even remember the plant now, but one of the plants is used in the Chanel number 5 perfume, which is
Okay.
like a famous popular
Yes.
perfume. And this was the kind of thing that, it would catch people's attention.
Okay, so
This
that would
plant
be a
that you
winner
see,
fact. Yes.
exactly, see this plant in front of you that's in the middle of the Lebanese mountains? This is in Chanel #5 perfume. Like, whoa, kind of this kind of thing.
A little editing note here. After asking Salma for the name of the plant, this is the information that she sent me back. So the plant in question here is Styrax officinalis, which in Arabic can be Hose, Liban, Ben, and the perfume in question was Chanel number 19. And so Salma also kindly compiled for us a list of other perfumes in which this plant is used, which is Opium by Yves Saint Laurent, Shalimar by Guerlain, Bois d'Argent by Dior, and Tobacco Vanille by Tom Ford. It's a shrub that can actually grow up to a few meters, that has beautiful white flowers. And now back to the episode. Okay, so where you see this project going is what you just explained to us. Basically, now
Mhm,
it is at the phase where it has to be tested out by the nature guides who have access to it and who would like to request it and try it on their um, guided hikes. And
mhm,
then hopefully you'll be able to get people to fill out questionnaires, sorry, or give feedback on how their experience was, whether they thought the facts were digestible.
exactly.
Now, for future perspectives and other potential projects, would you like to tell us more about other projects that you are working on or that your colleagues are working on at the research center?
There's one, it's not directly with my research center, so I can't speak too much about it, but they helped us a lot, is at the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture at AUB, it's called MSFEA. There was a incubator called the Saving Lebanese Biodiversity Incubator, and they're working on creating a Lebanon-based plant app that can identify Lebanese plants.
Okay.
So it's an awesome project. They collected a lot of data from the field, and so they helped us identify the most common plants in Lebanon. Um, and whenever they do launch this app, maybe you can have them on the podcast and
Yeah,
they
it would be
can
really great.
talk more about it. Otherwise, nothing off the top of my head in terms of our research center on plant-related topics. We're doing some cool stuff about how climate change is impacting the Middle East in general, and more specifically, hiking trails and agritourism. So kind of a
Okay.
different world, but it's interesting. Just how is tourism going to be impacted by climate change, and how is hiking tourism specifically?
Yes. Well, in all cases, I see that a lot of topics that you work on are also meant to have a direct impact or be easy to use. Uh, Let me say this, otherwise I'm rambling. To have a direct field application.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's something I really like about the center is it's all the aim is like community-based approaches and
Yes.
things that have a field application, like you said. Sometimes think without that, it's hard to see impact or connect
Y-
research to impact.
Yeah, I think it's in general difficult to produce something that is useful to the community if you do not ask them their opinion first or know what they actually need. So, well, that is great. And also, I hope that in the near future, you will be able to tell us about other projects and more projects that you're working on in this vein. And now to wrap up the interview, how can others be involved? Is there anything that the general public can get involved in, apart from, of course, sending you random plant facts?
Mhm. I think the first thing on my mind is we have an internship program this summer. We started last year and it's becoming annual.
Okay.
It's mostly for undergraduates that kind of they can participate in the different ongoing projects we have. So they can get some research experience. There are sometimes opportunities for field work, but it's mostly getting research experience with different topics related to nature conservation. So I
Okay.
think the call is going out soon, but if anyone's interested in that, they can also message me through you somehow and participate.
Yes, we can ask people to message me directly, or I can in all cases act as an intermediary. But if people want to contact you now, if they are interested, or if they could not find the call online,
Hmm.
don't hesitate to send a message. Again, to close off this interview, I feel like I've already said that. What advice would you give to people who want to go into environmental fields, even if this was not their original idea or even their, you know, their main background? What would you tell people who would like to work in the environmental field in Lebanon?
Mm, that's a tough one, but I think it's, first of all, the environmental field is huge. There's so many different faces to it. I feel like there's the more maybe eco-centered, like pure nature conservation, working with plants and animals, or marine systems. And then there's more, maybe the more people-facing aspects of it, like urban planning or policy or governance. There's just so many different faces that I think it's first about figuring out what you like to do. And then the second piece is what about the environmental field fuels you. So it comes with time, but if you have a good idea of something, an environmental issue that really affects you, that's, I think, a good place to start. The second piece is, I'm not sure what you think about this, but I find that we had some students come into our center recently, and we were talking about environmental challenges in Lebanon, and they're kind of thinking of applying to university, and they're very much like, is there any money in this field? You know, just very straight up, like this field, you're not gonna be successful. Kind of, it's an, I don't think it's just Lebanon, but it's an idea that you can't have a career in the environmental field because it's, you don't really know what jobs are out there. And so I would just say that that's not the way to think about this field because it's very needed. There are jobs, there are opportunities. It's, I feel like if you work in anything, you're going to somehow be indirectly related to the environment at some point.
Yeah.
So it's very cross-cutting. But I don't know what you think about that, or if you've come across that too.
Yes, of course. I would say that nothing guarantees you opportunities. I would agree that this is not a very productive way of looking at it. Sometimes you have to create your opportunity. And you can also be the one saying, listen, hey, I can bring this expertise to the table. What do you think? Let's create a project. And sometimes this ends up in you having an internship or even a career. So I would say combine what you would like to be doing
Hmm.
with like a regular, keeping regularly an eye out on the market, on your target audience, and seeking out opportunities that you can, well, that you can interject in or that you can present yourself at. I'll cut off
No,
half of
exactly,
this.
exactly. I have the same view. And I think maybe if someone is very fueled by the environment or has a passion for working in it, just don't let those ideas deter you, because I think they actually can be very unproductive, like you said, and it can actually stop
Yeah.
some people from entering these fields.
Yes, I would say that not everything you like has to be a hobby. It can also be your job. And likewise, not everything you like has to be your job. It can also be your hobby. There are a lot of ways to, you know, change your career direction. You are an example, but
Mm-hmm.
when you start out, you always have the example that your trajectory will be set in stone the moment you decide or the moment you take up your first internship or your first job, and that is just completely false. And like another similar question, which is also as someone who started out with plants as a hobby and who now works in a more formal way around plants or you know related to plants, what would you tell people who are interested in plant identification or in plants in general? Like, what were some of the resources or the little starting points that were useful to you that you would like to share?
I love this question. Because I feel like I've learned a lot about this as the years have gone on. I think my biggest uh, advice would be to interact with plants. So, and on the note of resources, have you read the book Braiding Sweetgrass, or have you come across it by chance?
No, not at all. Braiding
Okay, awesome.
sweetgrass?
Yes, so it's called
Okay.
Braiding Sweetgrass, by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And it's about, I'm going to read just a little title because it can do a better job than, but Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants. So she's an Indigenous person who has this kind of Indigenous knowledge about plants, but wanted to go become like a formal botanist. And in the beginning of the book, she says she wants to know why plants are beautiful. And the kind of admissions person was like, I don't think you understand botany. Like you're not cut out for this. You can't ask questions like that. And so the whole book kind of reads about what is our understanding of science and plants and how we interact with them. And there's a chapter about how sometimes identifying plants can distance yourself from them because you just name it. You might move on, you might not spend more time with something than just naming it. So she suggests interacting with it, understanding its relationship to an ecosystem, just observing it, just being with it. And so me and my friend, we were working at that farm camp at the time in Canada, and we were like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna use this book and we're gonna play a game with the kids. So we took them to the forest and we said, everyone has 5 minutes to pick a plant and you can observe it and look at it. And then in 5 minutes, you have to come up with a name for it. So what would you name the plant? And every kid was kind of drawn to a different part of the forest and they took their time, and it was interesting. Sometimes they'd go to the same plant and then they'd drift off and kind of follow their curiosity basically. And then they were so intentional with the naming. I can't think of any of their names right now, but they saw how these plants looked, how they tasted. Sorry, not tasted. That would have been bad. But how they
Yes.
smelled, how they felt, and they just let their creativity come through and develop a relationship. So it's a bit of weird advice, but it would be that I think when you connect with nature and spend time with it, you develop a curiosity for it rather than kind of starting in a textbook and saying, I'm going to learn about plant identification. I would start like the opposite way, where you get curious about what's around you, anyways, what's in your tiny community or garden or area, and work from there.
Well, this is very interesting because I would agree that trying to start plants or any group for that matter by trying to classify things can feel very sterile. So
Mhm.
it's just very interesting to hear you say, yes, like go interact with these living beings. In a sense, what you're asking people to do is to build their own stories with these plants. You will end up connecting the plant, the color, the smell to a season, to an anecdote, to a place. And ultimately,
Exactly.
this is how you build your mental database.
Exactly that. And that kind of goes back to how I didn't have a natural interest in plants. I didn't start with the books. It started with little fun facts and being around them and people sharing their plant stories. And
Mm.
then I would be like, that's so cool. I want to know more. So yeah.
Okay. Well, to wrap this up for real this time, do you have any closing ideas? I will put in the caption that people can contact the podcast page to be put in contact with you if they wish.
One actually about earlier what you had said way in the beginning. I should have mentioned it when we were there, but
It's fine. I always do that. Go ahead.
okay, great. So you know how you were saying that kind of Lebanese people or our culture, it's very intertwined with the land, and you might not see it at the first sight. So there's this idea that we don't care, but we really do. I just had something came to mind when the war happened. I was leaving because I left during, and at the airport there was this lady, an older lady from Australia, Australian Lebanese, and this was her fourth time evacuating. And I was saying to her, this is so depressing. And we were both really fed up to leave. And she said, if my kids weren't worried about me, I'd stay. And somehow eventually we got on the topic of what was in season and what was blooming. And she's from the south and I'm from the mountains. And we were just fed up about missing the fall. And then she said, she had such a sad look on her face. And she said, the most upsetting thing is I can't harvest my olives. And I've just been waiting and waiting to harvest my olives. So kind of what you were saying about the story, like we have geopolitical problems, so it it almost kind of covers the environmental challenge. But if you look for it, it's that our care is very much there, and we love nature a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of this crazy context to be in Lebanon where you'd think that having all these troubles would cover that immediately, but it's actually always still there.
Yes, I would agree. All we can hope for is that we have the luxury of working on conservation without having to worry about a million other things, including your own basic safety.
Exactly.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
well, thank you for
And
sharing that
then
story.
thank you for having me. And also thank you to Leila Rosa Mawad for introducing us. She's my coworker. You had her on the
Yes,
podcast. And
yes,
shout
it's
out to
true.
her also for teaching me all the fun plant stories because she's upped my knowledge a lot. So couldn't be here without her.
Okay, well, thank you for your time and thank you for agreeing to come up on the podcast. This was a blast to record, and it was very nice to meet you.
Thank you.